Want to get out of here?
Oh, when? So wait a minute, there's an elite crew with all the best spider people in it?
Who's the new guy?
This is unbelievable.
This is the lobby.
This week on Talking About the Movies, we're heading back into the Spiderverse and going to a place that's bigger and more grander than we could have ever imagined. This week we're talking about Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse. With that said, welcome to another edition of Talking About the Movies, and of course we're talking about the biggest new release of the weekend, and that is, of course, Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse. Now, I'm going to do something different than my usual reviews. I usually just tell you everything you need to know about the movie. I try to mix in some spoilers in there too, but considering how much is in this movie, my initial plan was to do two separate reviews for this. One was going to be a Talking About the Movies episode, and the other was going to be a Reviewing Network Live preview, which I'm still going to do later tonight, but it's going to be for something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this review up into two. I'm going to start off with my non-spoiler review, and then after that, if you hadn't seen the movie, you could stop there. If you have seen the movie, I'm going to delve into the spoilers in the second half of my review, and I'll put timestamps below. So if you don't want to get spoiled or anything, just use the timestamps below, and you won't get spoiled. So with that said, let's get to it. Let's talk about the Spider-Verse. So this is the non-spoiler review here, and I'll start off with my thoughts on the other Spider-Man movies. I'll go through them quickly. I like the Tobey Maguire movies, most of them. Spider-Man 3 I think is the weakest, but I do like Spider-Man 2 the best out of that series. The Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies I'm not the biggest fan of, not because of Garfield. I think he's fine in the role. I hate the way those movies are set up. There's just way too much going on. They're setting up way too much stuff. And I was not saddened when that series got cut short. It's not because of Andrew Garfield that those movies are bad. It's because of everything, kind of the story around it. But my personal favorite Spider-Man series that we've gotten has been, surprisingly, the Tom Holland MCU films. I think they get better and better with each film. No Way Home I thought was the best one. And of course, my favorite Spider-Man movie, and one of my favorite movies of all time, is Into the Spider-Verse. It's a film that, on an animation standpoint, is amazing. On a story level, it's amazing. On a fun level, it's amazing. It packs in so much that you really like. It's in my 30th spot of my favorite movies of all time. It's replacing another film that was in there for the longest time, produced by the same people, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and that was the Lego Movie, who also wrote and directed that film. But they didn't direct this movie, Into the Spider-Verse. But I really liked Into the Spider-Verse a lot. Like I said, it's in my top 30 favorite films of all time. So I was really excited to see what they were going to do with this series going forward, because this is the first of a two-part story. It's been 5 years since the last film, and we're kind of just on the threshold of my criteria for sequels. Like, usually 2 to 5 years is probably the good length for a really good sequel. After that, it's tough to say, because most times sequels that come way after the last movie aren't that great, but then sometimes you do get those little gems every once in a while, like we got last year with Top Gun Maverick, but or even the Batman last year too. But I digress. There was a little bit of trepidations going into this. There's a lot for this movie to really do, to really surpass my really get to the expectations I had with it, is after seeing Into the Spider-Verse, which they have to do a lot to top what they did here. I thought the marketing did a very good job of showing that they could do that, not just from the animation level, but a story level too. And I gotta say, man, when I came out of this movie, I was not disappointed at all. In fact, I would go as far as to say that I might have liked this one a little bit more than Into the Spider-Verse, now that I've had time to think about it. But this is, like I said yesterday in my little short review, this is the best movie of 2023 so far. I said it would take something really good for it to surpass Creed 3, which I also really liked, but this movie pretty much did it. I mean, this is a film that is so incredible. It's a film that is so well done. It is so amazing to watch. Like, the animation is taken to a whole nother level here. There's different kinds of animation all throughout this movie. The design of the film is amazing. The visual look of the film is astonishing. I mean, this is stuff that you could never see in live action, no matter how hard they try to do. Like, this movie shows you why animation is so important, because it's mopping the floor against live action films. Like, there's things that live action just simply can't do that animation can do, and they show you that in this particular movie. It is such a well-made film, and they've got great talent to do this with. I mean, they got Joaquin dos Santos, who has been best known for his work on Avatar: The Last Airbender, and The Legend of Korra. Kemp Powers, who also who's directed and written some great films. Soul. He wrote a very underrated film directed by Regina King. I think it was Regina King or Regina Hall. I can't remember. It was Regina King. One Night in Miami. Fantastic film. If you haven't seen that, do yourself a favor and check that out. I mean, they got the talent here. Phil Lord and Chris Miller are writing this again. David Callum, who wrote the last movie, is back as well. I mean, there's just so much in this movie that really is something amazing to see. This is one of those movies that comes around every once in a while that you watch this and you feel like, okay, I've just seen something groundbreaking. I've seen something amazing. This is like for people. I get the feeling that this is like what Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was like, or something like E.T., or something like The Empire Strikes Back, or even more recently, something like Avengers Endgame, Top Gun Maverick, Spider-Man No Way Home. It's a movie that brings back the spectacle of going to the movies. It's a film that you have to see on a big screen to really appreciate what they're showing you here. But unlike something like Avatar: The Way of Water, I guarantee you'll probably watch this at home and you still get the enjoyment factor out of it. But it's great to experience this on a big screen, because the reactions to things that happen in this movie, it's those moments. Let me put it this way: you ever see that commercial for Cinemark where they show it at the beginning of the previews now, where they show everybody sitting down, and then when something happens, they all just slowly but surely just start going crazy because of what they just saw. Like, you see guys like convulsing and all that type of stuff, and you got the music playing in the background, the Vesti La Giuba, I think it's the way you pronounce it. You've heard this music before so many times. Like, I've always hated that commercial because it makes people go over the top for something that is. My thinking is that it's for people that are looking at something that's not really as insane or over the top as they make it seem to be. But this is the first movie that I've seen since that commercial came out that I would say those people have a legitimate right to act this way, because so much happens in this movie that is so stunning and so surprising with the way that it plays with your expectations. It's just like, okay, I can definitely see where you're coming from. I can definitely see what they're trying to do here, and I love that they're taking essentially an experimental chance with this, because there's a lot of experimental things going on here, not just in the storytelling, but not just in the animation, but the way that this film is playing around with what you think is going to happen. Like, there was times in this movie when I thought I knew what was going to happen, and then all of a sudden they throw several curveballs at you, and it's done in a way where it doesn't feel like it's completely out of the norm. This is stuff that could possibly happen, and really, that's really one of the things I really took away from this movie. This movie does know what to do to try to surpass what the first movie did, but take it as many steps further as they can. You got great voice acting overall. You got Shameik Moore back as Miles. Haley Steinfeld has a bigger role in this as Gwen Stacy. You have many of the same people back for the first movie. Brian Tyler Henry and Lauren Velez, who played Miles' parents, they are very good here too. I like that they gave him a much bigger story arc in this. Jason Schwartzman has a very good role in here. Issa Rae is new to the film as Jessica Drew. Karen Soani from Deadpool is Spider-Man India. Daniel Kaluuya is very good as Hobie Brown. Oscar Isaac is great as Spider-Man 2099, I thought that it was very cool the way they handled him. And the best thing I thought about this movie is when you think of two-part movies, my biggest problem with two-part movies nowadays is that one part is usually better than the second part, because they usually take a lot of stuff that should be more interesting and exciting and save that for the big finale in the second film. And I think one of the best examples of that is The Hunger Games. The Hunger Games had two really good movies, with the first one in Catching Fire, but when they split Mockingjay up into two parts, I really thought that was a big mistake on their part, because part one is not a bad movie per se, but it's kind of a boring movie when you really think about it. Nothing really all that intriguing happens. All the good stuff that happens in the second movie. We've had two-part films where the best things happen, but where it's worked both ways. Like, both films have been very good. The Avengers is a great example. Harry Potter is a great example. Back to the Future, back in the 80s, was a very good example of that. Like, they found ways to add more stuff to it, but also keep you wanting more for the next film, and ending it on a high note. And we've had examples when that doesn't work, of course. Twilight's one of the big examples. Allegiant, the Divergent series, was going to go down that route, but nobody went to go see Allegiant, and they basically got screwed out of trying to wrap up their story, which wasn't an intriguing story to begin with. But you get the point that I'm trying to make here. This movie, I think, did a really good job of packing in so much, but not a whole lot. Like, there's story going on. There's things that they're obviously building up for the second film, and it just keeps you on the edge of your seat. They're packing in enough story that you can get invested and never feel like you're coming out of it like you're not getting enough there. Like you feel satisfied with what you're getting, and you can't wait to see what happens next up. Because I really am looking forward to seeing what they do next. I hope they stick the landing. Right now, I think they can, considering the talent that they have involved here, and the fact that Sony is basically saying, do whatever you want, we know you're going to make the money for us, and as of right now, it has made the money for them so far. To kind of wrap up this non-spoilery part here, without giving too much away, I really love this movie. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a little bit better than, it surprisingly is better than Into the Spider-Verse. I think it is going to replace that as one of my favorite movies of all time, but I'd have to see it. I have to see it again, because that's one of the things I should say. You have to see this several times to get all the jokes. This is one of those ones where you really need to keep your eye to the screen, pay attention, because you're going to miss key things and little and even little side jokes that you really need to pay attention to if you're going to get the full enjoyment of the film. And I think that's something that you really need to do in this case here. But like I said before, man, this movie is amazing. This film is fantastic. Needless to say, it's my favorite movie of the year. Probably one of my new favorite movies of all time, but we'll see what happens with another viewing or so, because I definitely am going to try to see this again in theaters pretty soon. But I love this movie, man. I give this a major, major thumbs up. It's a fantastic film. I can't recommend it enough. Go and check this film out. You will not be disappointed by it. So, yeah, that's my non-spoiler review. And with that said, let us get on now to the spoiler review. Now, if you haven't seen the movie yet, don't want to be spoiled by it, shut the video off now and go see the film, man. You will not be disappointed by it. But the spoilers are coming up right now. Alright, so jumping into spoilers, let's start at the beginning. Like, I really like the main story that they have with Gwen Stacy to start the movie off, because we knew about Gwen Stacy, a good majority of her, in the first movie, but there was a lot open there to see how they can expand her character more, and I love the way they expand her story in this movie, because we get to see what happened to her best friend Peter Parker, who ends up becoming the Lizard. They show you how he's doing it, and her father, Gwen Stacy's father, George Stacy, who's played very well here by Shea Wingham. Shane Wingham, who's in Boardwalk Empire. He's also on True Detective. He's a great character actor. He plays this role. He plays her father so well here, and you can tell he's very conflicted by what he sees, because he thinks that it was Gwen that killed her. That was Gwen that killed her best friend, in Peter Parker. Like he wants to take her in at first, but she's trying to explain to her, and she eventually gets. Actually, no, that's a situation that happens later on, where they go to the Guggenheim Museum there, and she's going after this Italian Renaissance version of the Vulture, which is really great animation. I love the way they combine animation styles in here. It's amazing to watch here. You see the first appearances of Miguel O'Hara and Jessica Drew, who show up later in the film, and then her father realizes who's under the Spider-Woman mask, and it's Gwen, and he doesn't know what to do, but he has to do his job. He tries to arrest her, and she escapes to this dimensional portal and joins O'Hara and Drew, and they eventually will come back to that towards the end of the movie. There's a point when everything is setting itself up. She heads back to her home, and her father is there, and she basically decides to tell her what happened, and Gwen basically says, Gwen's father basically says he decided to resign as police captain, realizing that his resignation is evidence that canon cannot be safely violated. Because the whole thing in the movie, the whole thing about the Spider Society is that they have canon events. You'll find out later on, especially in the scene where we meet Spider-Man India, where there's a specific canon event that has to happen for Spider people, because if they don't, it wrecks the multiverse, and that changes the course of the movie all throughout, as we'll see later on as we'll talk about later on. But going back to Gwen's story, the fact that his resignation is evidence that canon can be safely violated when he decides to leave Earth 65 where she's at, and goes to try to help Miles out because of what happens at the end of the movie, which we'll get to. But what I like about that scene is that those scenes with Gwen and her father is that the animation style changes, the background changes every single time whenever you see her father there. It's like a different animation style, different color background, and it's really clever. It's very unique how they handle it, and I like the way they handle that. I think Shea Wingham and Haley Steinfeld really do have very good chemistry together as father and daughter, and it makes their story all the more interesting and all the more enjoyable to really appreciate. And that's just something I really took from the movie right off the gate. I mean, I thought that was very well done. Which leads us into Miles' story, where Miles is adapting to being Spider-Man, he's missing Gwen, and then he's struggling to live up to his parents' high expectations, which I do like that the parents have a bigger story in this movie, especially Miles' mother, who gets a lot of screen time in this movie. I thought she was very well done. I thought Luna Lauren Velez did a very good job of getting this material down right and getting the emotions in check. And there's great moments with her and Miles, and you could definitely believe that they really do love each other, even though Miles is going through all this pressure and he's having trouble trying to explain to everybody who he really is. And it leads to the event that happens at the end of the movie. But again, we'll delve into that when we get to that. But I thought that was one of the cool things that they did in that case. I like the way they handled the Spot in this movie because Jason Schwartzman does a very good job in the role. He starts off as a cookie-cutter villain of the week, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, somebody said that the Spot was in Spider-Man Unlimited. Well, he's a character that's been around for a long time, but he's been in animation too. He's been in the Spider-Man TV series, and he's often considered not a very good villain, but the way they do it in this movie is incredible. Like, he starts off as the villain of the week, but then he slowly but surely just starts to build this background behind him. We find out that the guy that was hit by a bagel in the first movie, when Peter and Miles were getting the what were they get? I can't remember what they were getting in the last movie. They were getting the computer to steal a new drive. I just had to remember what it was. But yeah, the guy that got hit by the bagel, that was his side. He becomes a prominent character in this movie. And I just love the way that he builds this up, because he basically blames Miles for turning him into this character, and he finds ways to travel to different universes. There's parts where he travels to a Lego universe. There's parts where he travels to a comic book universe. They even find a way to bring him into Venom. Like, I saw this clip and I thought, this really does not look real. It looks kind of fake. But then again, it reminded me of how they did it in Space Jam: A New Legacy, putting the Looney Tunes characters in these various movies. And I thought, okay, now that I understand what they're trying to do here. But I do love how this guy, who started off as this generic bad guy, all of a sudden becomes this major threat by the end of the movie. And I'm really curious of how they're going to do it. But I think I know what's going to happen. But I'm going to wait to delve into that until we get closer to the end of the movie. So I'll save that for later on. We then get to the Spider Society itself, and they just throw a ton of cameos in your face, like all these different Spider-Men. You get to see a lot of the characters there's characters from the previous movie, the Into the Spider-Verse. They show archives. They show people like Quippy Spider-Person. There's Web Slinger. There's Web Slinger with his horse Widow. They have Lego Spider-Man in here. They bring back the man who played Josh Keaton, who played Spider-Man in the Spider-Man animated series. They bring in the Spider-Man from the video game, the voice and the actor themselves. They even bring in live action into this movie. Donald Glover, who was Aaron Davis in Spider-Man Homecoming, shows up in here, and that's great what they do with him. Like, that's one of the things that makes me really appreciate the animation style that they do here, because they have this animation and then they have this live action actor Donald Glover there, and it seems seamless. It's amazing what they're able to do here. All these creative things that they're doing with Spider-Man in this is so well done. It's amazing to look at. It's just so... I love it, man. I love the way they handle this in this movie. And then we get to Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, which he's definitely different than what we saw in the last movie at the end in the post-credit sequence, which makes me... I have a theory. I think because they do eventually set up that there are different versions of different characters all throughout these universes. I want to say that maybe he's a different Spider-Man 2099 compared to the one that we see at the end of Into the Spider-Verse. Like, he's sort of an antagonist in a way. I have no reason to believe that that's actually true in this movie, and I could just be making it all up, but I thought that was one of the things I was thinking of, because he definitely looks a lot different compared to what he does in the end of Into the Spider-Verse. So I don't know if that's for certain. That's just my little theory I have going on about how this is going, but I do like the conflict that they have here. Basically, because Miles prevented the events of what happened to Spider-Man India in this movie, his father's death now becomes a canon event because of what happens. And even though Miles has already dealt with this type of tragedy with his Uncle Aaron in the last movie, he basically has to tell people that this is wrong. I could change this. And I mean, you could feel where everybody's coming from. For Miles, you don't want to see his father get killed, but you kind of also understand what Miguel O'Hara's trying to say. Like, stuff like this has to happen to keep the fabric of the multiverse going, and they explain how they do it in a very good way, and it leads to that great chase sequence that follows, which you see in the trailer, but it's very good. It's very well represented in the actual movie itself, and it's a very well done scene. I have to give him a lot of credit for that. And that brings us to the big climax of the movie. So I mentioned before that Gwen Stacy effectively makes amends with her father, but as this is going on, it turns out that Miles, because he had to escape from being captured by the other Spider-Man, and he thought he was sent back home, and they have this big build up to him telling his mother that, hey, I'm Spider-Man, and then she goes, who? And slowly but surely you start to realize, okay, he's been sent to an alternate Earth. Like, like I was saying in my non-spoiler review, the build up to these moments are very well done. Like, it starts off with her basically saying, who, and you slowly start to realize, okay, he's in a different dimension. But then it gets added to another level when you find out that his uncle Aaron is still alive, and it turns out in this universe he's still alive, but his father is dead. You again kind of expect that to happen. Miles realizes he's in a different world, the home world of the spider that bit him, and he eventually gets kidnapped. And he eventually meets the Prowler, a different Prowler, but it's not the Prowler, but it's a different Prowler than you think of, which, again, you kind of expect. But what you don't expect is who the Prowler actually is. And I should have known this, maybe because of where we're at, but my first thought was maybe that what if the Prowler actually turned out to be his father, and they just faked his death and all that? But then again, that's just my personal thinking about it. But no, it turns out that the Prowler in this is the Miles Morales of Earth 42, who essentially turned into a life of crime with his uncle. And I didn't find this out until later on. This is actually a different actor who's playing Miles as the alternate Miles, and that is Joel Jerome, who was in Moonlight a couple years ago, which was very good. He was also in When They See Us, a Netflix original miniseries. And I gotta say, man, I was not expecting a completely different actor. I thought they were going to get Miles, Shamik Moore to play Miles again, but that didn't happen this time. That didn't happen, and I love the animation in that scene. That's an example of the animation, because there's so much of a threatening presence for everybody in that scene. Like, there's so much, like, the way they shoot this scene is incredible. It gives you goosebumps, honestly. Like, when he starts playing, there's a song that plays, Ain't Gonna Run in the Heart of the City, that plays in the background, and when you hear it in the situation that Miles ends up being in, like, it just sent shivers down my spine when I saw that. It's just like, oh my god, like, they did such a good job of handling that scene, and I thought they did a phenomenal job at that. And I also was thinking about something that happened early on in the movie, because they showed a future where they showed a glimpse of the future where Miles' father dies, and there's a part where there's a split screen where one side is Miles and the other side is the Spot. And with this, what they're setting up here, I think what's going to happen is that the Spot is eventually going to merge with the Miles of Earth 42, or maybe he merges with the regular Miles, because they wouldn't have that set up there just for a throwaway. I feel like they're setting up for something much bigger, something much more grander. I think that's something that's going to be very interesting to see going forward. And that's the great thing about this movie, is that you watch this movie and you just keep thinking to yourself, where are they going to go? What's the direction they're going to take with this as we keep moving along here? Because the possibilities are endless right now of what's going to happen here. And like I said before, they throw in so much at you, but they at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's enough. There's definitely a sense that more is coming, a much bigger story is coming. But what you saw before, what you had just seen, is more than enough to satisfy you until the next movie comes out. And like I said before, man, this is the first time since Avengers: Infinity War where I've seen a theater light up as well as they did at the end for something that's going to happen going forward. I mean, it was almost like Endgame too. Like Endgame was the last movie I saw where everybody just stood up and applauded as much as they did, even though they did it in No Way Home too, when people stood up when we find out that the other Spider-Men are actually in the movie. And I'm also curious if there is. I really think they're going to try to bring everybody into from the Spider-Verse series into here at some point. They'll find a way to bring them all here, not just the Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to get Tom Hardy as Venom in here, or maybe even Jared Leto as Morbius, or maybe these other characters they're setting up for future spin-offs. But I'm making a possibility that they're going to be in the next movie in some way, shape, or form, like in a cameo or something. But it just seems like the movie is setting itself up to do just that. I mean, and really, that's all the spoilers I can really go into with this one that I know for sure are going to be worth talking about. But it just shows you how great of a movie this is, that it keeps making you guess what's going to happen. It makes you want to ask questions like what's going to happen going forward. What do you think will happen? Like type of stuff, like the thoughts I'm having of where this is going to go. I'm basically doing this because I've never really read the Spider-Man comics that these are based off of. I'm just going straight off the movies, but that's mostly because the movies can usually go their own route with it whenever they try to adapt storylines. I mean, No Way Home took one of the worst Spider-Man stories of all time, One More Day, and made it incredible. Like the way they managed to wrap that story up, is put that story in there, and the way they played it out here. So the possibilities are endless for what they can do with this movie. So I'm more than curious to see what's going to happen with the next movie. Hopefully we won't have to wait as long as we had to wait for this movie here, but I hope they stick the landing. I really hope they stick the landing with this. Like I said before, I love this movie to death. This is probably one of my new favorite movies of all time, man. I mean, this is one of those great theater experiences I'll never forget. So, like I said before, big thumbs up. Let me know your thoughts down below or what you think might have happened. But if you're going to spoil stuff, please be careful with the spoilers, because if you spoil stuff, I think it's not hitting very well, I will cut it out of the comments section, because I don't want people to see something that they're not supposed to see if they haven't seen the movie yet. But that's everything I have to say about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Of course, the next movie I'll be looking at next time is Transformers: Rise of the Beast. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with that one. Will they actually make a good Transformers movie without Michael Bay? We'll see what happens when I look at it next week. But thank you guys for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below on Across the Spider-Verse. And I'll see you guys next time. So until the next time I see you, take care.